All right, I'm told we're now live on Zoom, and we will have Rosemary, who's our host, to just introduce us to the session, and she will hand over to me, and then we will kick off with the conversation this morning. Rosemary?
Hello, and welcome to our webinar today, Thriving in Spite of COVID-19. We are thankful that you were able to take time off from your busy schedules to join us today to discuss this webinar. We at CPF are excited to host you today. We are living in a landscape that we have never seen before. No one has been here. No business has been here before. And so we have invited you, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can discuss ways to see how can individuals, how can businesses survive, and besides surviving, how can we strive? How can we thrive post-COVID? And if we are going to live with the COVID, then how are we going to thrive in this period? And so, ladies and gentlemen, we at CPF Consulting, which is the management advisory arm of CPF Financial Services, are excited to have you to discuss these issues because we trust that we will all pull through. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to hand you over to our moderator for the day, Ms. Cherry Ann Chebet, who will guide us in the deliberations so that then when at the end of it all, we all thrive and we all find a new way of doing business. Over to you, Terry Ann.
Thank you very much, Rosemary, and good morning. It's a pleasure to see you all. I see we have quite a good number that have joined us this morning on a very important and timely conversation. My name is Terry Anchabet. I will be the moderator of the session, and I'm really looking forward, both as a citizen of this world that we live in today, as well as an entrepreneur, and just to find out, how can we thrive? Because it is here with us, and as Rosemary says, we have to find out if it's staying with us, where do we go? If it will leave, then what next? So the session for today is called Thriving in Spite of COVID-19, and we are looking at the future of business. I'll just quickly take you through what to expect this morning. We will start by a number of presentations from Martha Cheruto. She's the Deputy CEO of Kenya Private Sector Alliance at KEPSA. And we'll also have a presentation by Chris Hafner, who's a management consultant, a venture capitalist, and an entrepreneur. And right after that, we'll have some in-depth conversations with Jose Akili. He's a CPF Group Managing Director and CEO, and also our host this morning, Dr. Julius Kipniatich, the Regional CEO, Jubilee Holdings, and Jeffrey Odundo, the Chief Executive of Nairobi Securities Exchange. And thereafter, we'll have an interactive session where I'd like to encourage you all, the members of our audience, to just take advantage of the chat as well. Post any questions that you have or any feedback. And even as we continue on, I'll be able to read and pose the questions to our panelists. And then right after that, we'll have the closing remarks by Rosemary Minor, who is the head of CPF Consulting and our host. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists this morning. I'll just quickly go through their bios so we can go right into the conversation. Martha Cheruto is a seasoned engineer with a wealth of experience in both public and private sector. She has a track record of contributing to the overall growth strategy of organizations. She's worked in several organizations, including Kenya Association of Manufacturers, that CAM, Kenya Power Lighting Company, that's KPLC, and she's also actively involved in mentorship and women empowerment. Martha Cheruto is joining us today as the Deputy CEO of Kenya Private Sector Alliance. We also have with us Dr. Julius Kipniatich, the Regional CEO, Jubilee Holdings. He's the immediate former CEO of Uchumi Supermarkets, and he brings to this panel an extensive knowledge and experience in strategy and management. And of course, at this point in time, we must really refocus on strategy. As business and as entrepreneurs, we must go back to the drawing board. And as many say, the reset button has been hit. So what next? And we will be engaging with Dr. Kipngetich a lot around the strategy space. He's previously served as the COO of Equity Group, where he spearheaded regional growth and new product development. He is also a director and CEO of the Kenya Wildlife Service, where he has been credited with a complete turnaround of the organization. It was during his tenure at KWS that when KWS recorded tremendous growth and was listed as one of the top 5 most respected parastatals in East Africa. Chris Hafner is a management consultant and venture capitalist and entrepreneur. He is an experienced executive, non-executive director, management consultant, board advisor, and entrepreneur. He's passionate about building clarity, capability, and confidence to bridge the strategy execution gap, and has worked with executives, board members, and global organizations on corporate strategy, business model innovation, and innovation strategy. And as you can see from his profile, we will be engaging a lot within that space of innovation and strategy going forward. Jose Akili, CPF Group Managing Director and CEO, and which is one of the largest retirement benefit schemes and related services provider in Kenya. He's an advocate of the High Court and currently serves as a member of the Finance Committee of the International Social Security Association, a non-executive director at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, council member and chairman of the East and Central Africa Social Security Association, that's ICASA, a regional body for organizations in the social security sector. And of course, that's an interesting space to look at today in terms of contribution around about this time. Mr. Jeffrey Odundo is the CEO of Nairobi Securities Exchange. He's an accomplished investment banker, having been in the financial services sector for the last 27 years, 21 of which have been in the capital markets. Mr. Odundo has advised on a number of corporate finance mandates in both public and private sectors. He has also managed key mandates in the asset management industry and contributed to the growth of the capital markets in his previous role as a director and board secretary, Kenya Association of Stockbrokers and Investment Banks, chairman of the Financial Standards Committee, Kenya Bureau of Standards, as well as the board director of the Nairobi Security Exchange, PLC. All right, so we will now quickly kick off with our presentations, and I would like to invite Madam Martha Cheruto to first just kick us off with her presentation, and right after that we can go into a Q&A. And as I mentioned, please use the chat button, which is on the right side of your laptop if you're using that, and then start engaging with us so that at the end we can be able to just kick off with the questions. Ms. Cheruto.
Okay, thank you, Terian. Good morning, everybody. As you've heard, I'm Martha from CAPSA. I'll be representing my CEO today as she had an urgent engagement to participate in. So we'll take you through the presentation. Basically is what CAPSA is all about, our engagement with government, our interventions during this COVID period, and also what the future looks like for all organizations within the private sector. So we can move to the next slide, please. So CAPSA is the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. It is an organization that hosts other business membership organizations, and it was registered in 2003. And currently our membership cuts across. We have business associations, as you can see listed there. We also have SMEs and startups that we hold their hand to get into the private sector base. We also have multinationals, and you can see from the umbrella generally, that is what constitutes our membership. So you have MSMEs, you have the corporate members, and when we look at all this, we actually cut across to over 500,000 members within the country. So how do we engage? Because we said CAPSA is the link between government and private sector. We have various platforms, which we term them as public-private dialogue platforms. And we do this through 16 sector boards, and our sector boards meet at the government. So we have, I'll just mention a few. An example is we have the education sector board, we have the ICT sector board, the tourism, we have devolution and planning, we have education, we have environment, amongst others, and even industrialization. And therefore we engage with the cabinet secretaries through the ministerial stakeholder forums, which we term them as MSF, and even engage the directors of agencies and other organizations and stakeholders within those sectors. And then beyond that, through those engagements, we also move it to the next level, because as CAPSA, we're involved in policy discussions, and our mission is to ensure that there's year-on-year improvement in the overall business environment, to encourage investment and unlock opportunities for businesses to thrive. Therefore, you'll find us engaging with the governors through the Council of Governors Forum that we host annually. We also have annual Speakers Roundtable, and this is both for the National Assembly and also the Senate. And also we have one with the Chief Justice, and I mentioned with the state agencies and also the development partners, when we find what else can we do internationally together, and also the regional forums, because CAPSA engages also with the East African Business Council, amongst others. And then all this lead into the private sector NDICC roundtable, which is chaired by the Dr. Matiangi. And finally, the apex of all these public-private dialogues that we have is now the presidential roundtable. When COVID came in, especially in March, the first thing that we did is we had to set up our own committee internally with all our sectors, and that enabled us to meet the president just to see what else we need to do to manage the crisis. So when you look at COVID, which is new to everybody, and as you've said, and even the previous discussion, is that what opportunities are there and what does it mean to us? So when we look at the effect on the global economy, it is actually taking us to a dip. We're all expecting a negative 3%. But even in Kenya, you can see that already we have shrunk it. We're actually looking that it will grow to 2.5%. Initially, we had projected for 6.1. And you can notice, even from the graph that is on the screen, other countries are expecting the same, and it's majority of the countries expecting a negative growth, which is unfortunate. But as we say, we can always look at the positive side of it. What are the lessons we're learning from this crisis? We can move on. So as I mentioned, as CAPSA, we meet weekly. Initially, we were meeting twice a week when the crisis started. We were all trying to understand, what do we need to do as private sector? How can we maneuver this process? What do we need to do to ensure that the economy just doesn't go into a dip and people do not lose jobs? Because one of the items we also focus on is job creation, and both economic and social growth. Therefore, what we started with is we had a monthly survey just to assess the situation. How have organizations gone through it? How do they understand? What is the impact, the direct impact to it immediately? And even came up with proposals. So we developed an economic management framework for COVID-19 response. And as I mentioned earlier, this is what we presented to the president with the cabinet secretaries, just to inform him that this is our proposal for each sector. And if you remember, we have 16 sectors. So therefore, each sector came up with proposals and even interventions that we needed the government to come up with. And some of them were implemented, which I'll just highlight it. And then the other thing that we decided to do, because it was a new thing, we set up a call center that is 1196, which is 24-hour. And this call center just provides information to the business community, to the public, to our stakeholders, to get information. What is COVID all about? And currently, we've also linked it with the 719. And even what we are doing, because of what has been happening and people not following guidelines, we've also used it now as a reporting center, working with Citizen TV, Telesky, and the National Police Service to use that center to educate people and even report where interventions are required. Then we also have an information portal. The portal still gives information. You can access directories, like even one of our members, Kenya Association of Manufacturers. You can get to know what is around within the country. We have the Kenya Healthcare Federation, who also takes care of our health sector board. So that is where you can get into the information. So part of the interventions that we saw coming in through the engagement between private sector and government is that we got the 56.6 billion, if you remember the economic stimulus program, which supported affected sectors, and then payment, of bills, the pending bills and VAT refunds. I remember, I think as of June, ACARED was given out about 25 billion, and they're still planning to add more. And we're still continuing to engage with the Treasury to see how much more can they pay in terms of the pending bills and even the VATs, just to give people liquidity and ensure that there is flow of cash within the country. Then we saw what central bank did. They lowered it to 7% and even the CRR to 4.25%. Majority of us, I believe almost everyone, benefited from the reduction of pay for those earning less than 24,000 do not pay anything, but then it was reduced to 25% from 30. We also saw the reduction of VAT by 2% coming to 14, and that we've seen the impact to the businesses. And you can see on the slide on the right side, what it means to business when we did the survey between May and June, what percentages and how people benefited. Fortunately, the list was on the pending bills. Only 6% say they benefited, and therefore it's something that we're still engaging government to ensure that more payments can be done. Only 11% benefited from VAT refunds. We have received feedback and we're still engaging government. So the other thing was also facilitation of cargo movement. Remember, the curfew started initially at 7 p.m., then it also stretched to 9 p.m., but then there are some essential services that need to continue. And therefore, what we did as private sector is that we facilitated stickers during that period to enable business operations continue so that there's no halt to that. We can move on. So one other item that we can always ask ourselves is what opportunities did we realize as private sector and what did we do to step in the gap? And all this we did in partnership with government and of course our stakeholders. So I can highlight them on 5 areas. One was in terms of igniting the Made in Kenya. Remember, we always say buy Kenya, build Kenya. So through that, we've seen organizations reconfiguring their factories and even changing their production lines. We have seen Kenya actually being on the forefront on manufacture of PPEs and even promoting sanitizers. Some also use the ethanol that had been rejected just to ensure there's flow of PPEs and even sanitizers. And currently 64 companies got approvals from KEBS, and therefore locally, we can be proud to say that we produce our PPEs, and you can remember the CS mentioning that our standards are actually very high. The other thing that we've also seen in terms of that is that there have been innovations, and we are happy to mention that we saw 2 innovative ventilator models. One was from the automotive sector of KEM and also Toyota Kenya coming in just to mention that these things can be done locally. So those are just some items I decided to highlight. We're also looking at digitizing operating models. We were told to stay home or try as much as possible to be where you are instead of movement. So what has it done? We've seen e-commerce being boosted, we've seen digitization, and we've seen content being there. We've also seen telehealth growing. Like now we've also fast-tracked accreditation of over 40 telehealth providers. And then remember the discussions on waiving of fees so that people don't handle cash. There was waiving of fees for transaction, including M-Pesa. When we look at cross-sector collaborations and just asking ourselves, because one of the things you remember from SDGs is about partnership, and that is one of the items that private sectors CAPSA promotes, is that we came, there was a launch for the Safe Hands collaboration where over 30 companies came together to support free soap, sanitizers, and especially to the vulnerable communities. And even the other thing that we're looking at, who are the other vulnerable people during curfew, and we launched the Wheels for Life, the call center. This is under the healthcare sector, whereby we're ensuring that pregnant women, because we saw people shying off from accessing the hospitals and even some just being at home. So we decided to come up with a program called Wheels for Life that champions in the evening. We provide transport, and we're not doing this, of course, alone. We have Bolt, we have the Nairobi Metropolitan, we have the Ministry of Health with us, we have Telesky, we have various partners in this, who thereby, when you call the number at 1196, you're able to talk to a doctor who will understand you. If you need to go to hospitals, you'll actually be facilitated and taken to a government facility. So far we've done over 500 free rides. And this led to now the next project that we've done is we also introduced the Men in Silence, still calling the 1196, just to support those who the victims of violence at home. So in terms of ease of doing business, we've seen, because of liquidity challenges and even loans and people not having money, is that we've seen 844 billion loans restructured. Part of our members is KBA, and this is also feedback we get from them. I mentioned about KEBS. We've seen PVOCs being removed on essential products and also zero rating so that we continue. And finally, what we've done in strengthening healthcare capacity is that we've done resource mobilization, because remember, we are trying to promote the healthcare in the country. So we've seen donations of mattresses. Other things that we did also just strengthening is to give people hope. And you saw what we did on the Flowers of Hope project. We sent out flowers locally and even internationally, just to show compassion and tell these people, yes, you're in the front line, but remember, we are with you. We also support the COVID-19 response fund, procurement of testing kits. I remember even at the border, we gave out thermoguns just to be there for everybody where we can be. And therefore, we've had webinars building capacity. Remember, all this is new, so everyone is coming up with a new item, and therefore we've had webinars just telling people on what they need to do, training over 2,200 healthcare workers. We've also seen the security people being trained. We've seen others volunteering who've come up and say, I'm available, where do I support you? And so those are the 5 areas that we can say we've done in partnership with government, and I've just adjusted the highlights that we've mentioned. We can proceed. I'm almost done. So these are the organizations we just picked on what has happened or who've mobilized resources. And even from the group, we have Jubilee Insurance, and also the people we've seen who've come out to just support this period. Of course, we work with EABC, as we said. Our chair is currently the chair of also EABC. We've seen Bidco coming up. We've seen Unilever, Safaricom. I won't mention their names. This is not exhaustive, but this is just some of the items. And we've seen even over 5,000 daily meals. And I can mention to you one other thing that we did was that we would engage the healthcare workers within Nairobi and provide lunch for them. So you'd see hotels coming in and actually giving them out. So, and even recently, we just gave out buses through Isuzu to the Ministry of Health so they can transport healthcare workers. So you can see private sector came in to actually show solidarity with the government that we're in this together. So we can continue. In all this, there are 2 things when we talk about a crisis. You can either talk about a problem or you can talk for an opportunity. And therefore, the opportunities that we've seen is, of course, in terms of capacity development. So people need to be trained, you need to reskill people to look at the future. So everything right now is about the future. What does it mean? You no longer meet people. So when people are working from home, what needs to be done? So we look at also the new digital and digitally enabled jobs across the sectors. We've seen digital content, freelancing, and anything that is just around digital, trying to minimize human contact, use of technology, teleconferencing, even like this meeting. Of course, we didn't meet physically, but it has actually managed that we can still reach out. And one other thing that we did as CAPSA is we actually petitioned and we got approval to have non-listed members do their AGM. And we also did our AGM virtually, and it was successful. And we still got quorum. So it means all this is possible. So using technology is an opportunity that everyone can get across it. The other third thing that we're looking at is fast tracking of the SEZs, the special economic zones. If you remember, when we locked out the borders, there was a bit of crisis. People wondering, so where do we import? What do we need to do? The value chains have been disrupted. What can we do? So it means we can transform it, and therefore we need a fast tracking to ensure that we have the SEZs fully operational, and therefore also leveraging on regional markets within Africa. And thanks to FTA that is coming soon for the African continent, then this is an opportunity to use for us to fast track it. Of course, we mentioned in terms of development of local value chains and innovation capacity, import substitution, production of essential goods. The country is still run, though not at maximum capacity, but it means all of us now have an opportunity. If you're thinking of getting into manufacturing, you're thinking of getting into tourism, then opportunities are there that you can take across. And the biggest opportunity that this has shown us is that we need to strengthen our local healthcare systems. It became a crisis. We've seen what has been happening. We're not able to manage what is happening currently. Is therefore we just need to come out, all of us, and say, what do we need to do to ensure that the healthcare system in the country is working for us? Therefore, just to look at the layoffs that we've seen and even what has happened within the various sectors, we can see the 70% in terms of environment was not really affected. So majority of them were retained. But in the hospitality industry, 31% only retained their jobs. But you've seen the effect of the crisis on tourism. So we've seen manufacturing being affected. We've seen the professional services, majority of them are within the country. The wholesale and retail also affected, but also 68% were retained. And therefore, we're just saying all these opportunities, when you look at every sector, you can sit down and just analyze within my sector, within my professionalism, what can I do to move to the future? So as I get to the last place, just to finalize so that we finish on it, is what are we doing for the future, and just making sure that we can still manage, bring back, have a bouncing economy, and everyone coming back to jobs. It's unfortunate that we've seen others close down. That's a reality, but we've also seen others come up. And from a survey, we noticed 2% actually of the businesses who hired more during this period, which is not common, which someone would wonder, wow, it was a crisis, we expected a dip, but they actually hired. So the other things that we've done, and we feel businesses can now emerge stronger from this, is development of protocols. It was new. but we need to operate our businesses. How do we operate them? So we developed protocols with government, and you've seen it circulating. So every sector would start with the minister or the cabinet secretary and the agencies and analyze the protocols. Therefore, we supported development of protocols for operation during the COVID-19 period. And we're even happy that when the resumption of international flights started on first, we were part and parcel of it. And therefore, it is a blessing that we are coming back. The other thing that we will continuously do as private sector is championing for enabling business environment during this period. And as I mentioned, so what we do as private sector, we meet every Tuesday, and during the week, we still meet our sector leaders to ask what else can we do, engaging with any other agency or partner that we feel can come in. The third thing that we are doing also is to partner with our stakeholders, and one of them is Timea. We've seen SMEs who are highly affected, and therefore we have a project with them just to train over 2,000 SMEs on e-commerce, digital marketing, and onboarding them on the various digital marketplaces. And this, there's something just to add on to this, is that we've joined also be working with Google to train people on the various platforms so that they can have the capacity and get out there and put their work outside. MasterCard Foundation also came in as a very good support to CAPSA, and we are supporting also still on SMEs. And at the same time, we work with the Ministry of ICT on digitization and just promoting digital jobs, especially for the youth. And finally, other things that we've done currently is to partner again with the Educate Global Rapid Technical Assistance Program, a response team, and they're therefore supporting businesses in the food, in the health and education sectors through financial restructuring, and also reviewing and addressing critical operational issues they're facing. So generally, Terian and my members, what we are saying as CAPSA is COVID came in, it hit us, yes. But can we get out of it? The answer is yes, we can get out of it very positively and stronger. So all of us need to hold our hands. Let us do this together. It calls for more collaborations, partnerships, reskilling, thinking, changing or re-engineering our business processes, and even our business models and our production lines, just to move to the future. So I believe we have a bright future ahead that all of us can continue working together. So thank you so much for your attention, and over to you, Terian. Thank you.
Wow, Martha, thank you so much for that really in-depth sort of analysis of how the private sector has been looking at this and, you know, supporting the government quite a lot. And I just looked at some of the initiatives that you've taken. And, you know, what really stood out for me, of course, as a mother as well, is the Wills for Life. And, you know, I've had stories about you know, women giving birth in, you know, on the way to hospital. I know my sister's neighbor's house girl also gave birth in their servants' quarter. And, you know, so there's a lot of screaming and just people coming to help. And, you know, it is initiatives like this that really not only save lives, but initiatives that you have taken as KEPSA in regards to the SME space, because as we all know, that's one of the most affected areas, because they, at the end of the day, they create most of the employment opportunities in the country today. And just looking at the growth as well, you know, Kenya at very timely conversation. You can also catch the conversation, which is live on YouTube. On our chat segment, there is a link there that our team at CPF has provided. Please be sure to share it online. For those who have not been able to join us as yet can also watch live on YouTube. I'd like now to welcome Chris Hafner to give us his presentation. Chris?
Good morning. I will share my screen. And are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can, Chris.
Fantastic. So the topic, thriving in spite of COVID-19 and the future of business. So as Winston Churchill said while working to form the United Nations after World War II, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think it's important to acknowledge you know, the tragedy, the human tragedy of the economic tragedy of what has happened as a result of COVID-19. And I think we're all quite familiar with that narrative. But it's important for us from a business perspective to focus on, yes, we need to focus on survival, but we also need to focus on emerging and evolving. So two very important words that I suggest every organization adopt and use in their dialogue and discussion. So rather than talking about, a return or talking about going back to something, it's really not about the past. It's about the future. It's about how do we emerge and evolve into what people are talking about and referring to as a new normal. As an entrepreneur, I tend to be a bit contrarian. And so when we talk about, a crisis and not letting it go to waste, it's really about trying to understand what are the seismic shifts, not what are the acute changes, but what are the significant changes, and how can we emerge and evolve and leverage the changing landscape and ecosystem around us. In 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, and at the time I was living in the United States, we also had a very significant housing market crisis. And as a bit of a contrarian, I observed the environment. I understood the housing market quite well, dug deep into an area that I had no experience in prior to that, and developed a very unique value proposition for corporate relocation and residential property services. So created, at the time, we didn't have the great, cool term digital platform, but what it was a digital platform for the maintenance of corporate relocation real estate in the residential sector. Sold that business in 2013. So while this is a time of crisis, there are tremendous opportunities for those willing to, pick their heads up, look beyond just, survival today, and look out into the future and try to understand what's really happening at a macro scale. So what I like to tell people is, I'd like to say to you, Happy New Year. It's 2025. Just most people don't know it yet. And I say that because we have seen the advancement in certain areas, in certain industries, in certain segments, and certainly across technology that would have taken no less than 5 years to occur, happen in a matter of weeks. When you look at large financial services institutions, for example, here in the UK, Lloyds Bank, it would have taken 5 years for them to consider how to have the bulk of their workforce work remotely. And in a matter of weeks, what in their normal course of business, their normal modus operandi and normal way of doing things would have taken years, if not decades, they literally accomplished in weeks. And so we need to understand what are the fundamental changes in behavior, because it's not just the need to go to Zoom meetings to have a conversation like this as opposed to being face to face. The entire market is moving to a wave of digital adoption that we've not seen previously. So it's not just someone trying to push out technology, not just trying to push out new business models, but it's consumers who are having to adopt those. So we're not just talking about businesses using teleconferencing, video conferencing technology, it's families trying to stay in touch with each other, and not necessarily families separated by continents, but families who can live in the same city, but through lockdown have not been able to see each other, so are having to use technology as a means to communicate in a way that they hadn't previously. So consumer habits are fundamentally changing. I would like to point out, when we talk about digital, and we'll talk through a few examples, I think the words that we choose are very important. And when Martha was talking on one of her slides, there was this digitizing operating models. Now, I want to talk about the word digitization and the word digitalization. Most people and organizations will use those two words interchangeably, digitization and digitalization. But these two words have very different meanings. And if you're focusing on digitization, you will miss the opportunity in front of you, as opposed to focusing on digitalization. Now, the difference is this. Digitization is simply the act of taking that which is analog and making it digital. So taking a written contract, a paper contract, and digitizing it, running it through OCR, optical character recognition technology, and having digital text is an example of digitization. This webinar is an example of digitization, simply taking what we would have done face-to-face and doing it digitally. Digitalization is reimagining how work can be done, how processes can be accomplished, how we can interact and provide new sources of value to consumers in novel ways using digital technology. So digitization is more about the what. Digitalization is about the how. So an example of digitalization would be if we take those previous paper contracts and we've digitized them, we're now able to look at, say, the contract review process. So if you're a firm and you are acquiring another firm, we know that in that early days of acquisition, one of the activities you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at all of your supplier contracts, yours and the newly acquired firm, and all of your customer contracts, yours and of the newly acquired firm, and take a look and compare those. What are the various clauses? What are the pricing mechanisms contained in those contracts? Do you have most favored nations clauses in those contracts? And are there any, positions you perhaps need to renegotiate? And that takes a lot of human time, human legal review time. But in a digitalized world, you can take those now digitized text in those contracts. You can apply computer vision technology, natural language processing, neurolinguistics, natural language generation, and machine learning. And you can now automate that contract review, weeding out that which is mundane and that you don't need to pay attention to, and refocusing those areas of contracts where you're most exposed to your legal team, so you can work smarter, more efficiently. So there's a difference between digitizing and digitalizing. One of the organizations I'm a part of, the Association for Strategic Planning, like many organizations, has an annual conference. And they started talking about, well, we need to go online. So we need to do the conference via Zoom. And one of the things we did was we stopped and we said, stop. We need to take a step back, and we need to fundamentally ask ourselves, why did we have an annual conference in the first place? What was the purpose and intent of that conference? Why did people gather together, and what were they getting out of it? And so we could have rushed to digitizing the conference, which simply would have been delivering the same content via Zoom in the same way. But because we took a digitalization approach, we looked at how can we create more engaging content that could be reused over multiple periods of time across multiple platforms, and fundamentally rethought what the purpose of an annual conference is. So we've seen the advancement of digitalization as well as digitization quite rapidly. So we've seen it in areas such as healthcare. ConnectMed, which is a Kenya-based firm that was acquired last year by Merck, providing telehealth services. Now, this is a great example of digitization, right? Seeing your doctor remotely using video technology. Digitalization would then be looking at, how do I gather other vital statistics about a patient in this digital engagement? So how can I leverage wearables and other technology to capture things like heart rate, blood pressure, weight, height, and other vital signs to make a more digitalized experience? We've also seen the acceleration of contactless payments. and being not just taken up by, millennials and, a younger demographic who took on, neobanks and some of the fintech challengers, but we're now seeing contactless payments being, adopted, like, my 84-year-old mother who lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the United States, who never would have imagined she'd be taking an Apple iPhone and paying for goods or services in a contactless manner. We've also seen this acceleration in education, with educators being forced to move online. So a lot of this has been digitization, but there still remains tremendous opportunity in all of these areas to fundamentally ask, not simply, how do I deliver a university lecture online versus in person? But now that I am online, how do I fundamentally rethink the concept of education and learning? Which brings us to this question, which is, what is innovation? And as I said previously, the words we choose are very important. Most often, when people say innovation, what they're really thinking is invention, right? Creating something new that never existed before. And innovation is not invention. There's an old saying, inventors don't make money. And for the most part, that's true. Inventing something that hasn't existed is very time consuming, very costly, and very difficult to get out to market. Innovation, on the other hand, is where vast sums of profit can be made, of value can be delivered and extracted. So then what is the difference between innovation and invention? So invention is creating something new that has not existed, whereas innovation is leveraging existing capabilities, combining them in a novel way to create new sources of value. And if you think about a lot of the firms that we talk about today, well, if we talk about Apple or Airbnb or Uber, when we talk about these firms, and these are all firms that have been great at innovation, not invention. If you think of the first iPod from Apple, there wasn't a single component in that first generation iPod that was less than 5 years old. All of those technologies existed. They were just combined in a novel way to create a new source of value. So now more than ever, it's important for all of us in our organizations to observe the environment around us, observe the full context, and look at all of the capabilities that are out there and fundamentally ask ourselves, how can I combine these existing capabilities in a new way to create a new source of value? So we can start to extend into other areas. Because when we think about tourism, right, the human hunger for exploration and experiences is not going to change. Our ability to travel may be inhibited, but our hunger and our appetite to see what the world has to offer will not change. So the question isn't, so the one question might be, how do we get tourists back to Kenya again? And we do want to do that, and we do need to do that. But we can also look at this and say, but how can we take Kenya to tourists? How do we look at digital tourism? How do we create engaging, unique, bespoke experiences, leveraging AR, VR technology, leveraging drone technology, leveraging 5G, to bring those closer to us who may not be able to get to us as they have in the past? And we know consumer behavior is fundamentally changing. When we think of financial planning, personal financial planning, all of us at one time or another have gone through this cycle where the typical personal financial planning review looks like this. We gather up a list of all our expenses. We may write them down. We may put them into Microsoft Excel. We sort them then by the size of the expense, and we look at the big things. Well, there's our mortgage, there's insurance, Maybe there's a car payment, a lease payment of some sort. And when we get through the big ticket items, we kind of stop and we say, well, I can't do anything about that. I can't get rid of my house. I can't get rid of my car. I need a home. I need transport. And our financial planning starts to fall apart right there. When in reality, the discipline of financial planning and managing our personal finances comes down to the small disciplines of that coffee in the morning at the cafe that adds up day in and day out. And so not through discipline, but through lockdown and through this COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen that individual cash, whether that be in savings accounts or checking accounts, those amounts have risen significantly. Now, it happens to be because we don't have the ability to spend the way we did before. So I didn't have to have the personal discipline of deciding not to go to the Starbucks every morning for an overpriced small bit of coffee and quite a large amount of milk. I've saved that through force. But people over the period of months have now looked at their finances and they're coming to this realization of where they've spent their money. And many are vowing not to go back to that level of consumerism, that level of consumption that they had before. Now, at first glance, we might say, well, that's may not be good for business. But the reality of it is we need to fundamentally think about our business and ask ourselves, how do we emerge and evolve in dealing with consumers who have greater financial resilience, who are going to be much more thoughtful about what it is they procure and how they procure it. And then another provocation, something to consider, is that geography is everything and geography is nothing, all at the same time. So geography is everything. As Martha pointed out, a resurgence in made in Kenya, localization. How do I shop local? How do I buy local? I want locally farmed foods. I want locally produced goods. So geography is everything. Through the COVID-19 global pandemic, we've realized that as borders have closed, as travel has been restricted, as the movement of people and goods has been constrained, local access is everything. So how do we reimagine our business and our value propositions when geography is everything? At the same time, geography is nothing. So how can I leverage technology in a way that breaks down geographic barriers that have typically been impossible to break down? As an example, we're all familiar with the concept of outsourcing IT. Many firms have gone through various waves of outsourcing technology help and support. But we've never thought we would outsource functions such as sales and marketing. But now, salespeople, both B2C and B2B, are being constrained by geography. They can't get on a plane and travel and meet their customers the way they did before. So sales organizations are having to become virtual. And whether you're selling or whether you're buying, on either side of that transaction, of that relationship, you're having to engage digitally. Which brings about the question, why do I need my sales force to be based in London? Where can I find the most effective sales force that has the savviness and awareness and digital capabilities necessary to support a new paradigm in something like sales? So while geography is everything, at the same time, geography, the geographical barriers have been obliterated. And so I'll leave you with this. In a recent Financial Times article, Indian author and novelist Arundhati Roy said this: historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. So I think your biggest challenge is going to be breaking with the past, getting out of those old habits, not thinking about returning, but thinking about the future, imagining how you might emerge and evolve into a fundamentally changed world. Thank you.
Well, Chris, thank you so much, for your presentation and just for opening up our eyes to all this that you have brought to us this morning. And it's interesting you've talked about breaking up with the past. I was just having a conversation earlier with Dr. Kipngetich, and he said one of the biggest challenges that we will have now is breaking the habits that we have been used to for the last couple of years. So it is time now to really hit that reset button and begin to look at where we must go. And I like what you said about geography being everything and nothing at the same time, because for Kenya, for Africa, for the first time in years, we now have to think of our region as an actual market. In as far as we have, the East Africa community in Kenya, for instance, but business between our countries has almost always been majority around the borders and not necessarily myself sitting here in Nairobi selling body products or skincare products that I could actually find a market for in Uganda or Sudan or Tanzania. So thank you so much, Chris, for that. And I'd like to welcome now Dr. Kipngetich, who's got some very interesting views based on our conversation just before we started. Let's kick off with the habits, just picking up on what Chris Hafner has talked about and your thoughts around where we are now, as a country, as an economy, and where our mindset needs to go towards.
Okay, thank you very much, Terian. I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have said. I just want to probably add a few things. The first one, of course, is we need to understand the crisis itself. I think there's a lot of myths and misinformation, fake news about this disease. I would urge the members in this forum to begin understanding the basics of the disease. Remember, it's a novel disease, so get to know what it is. That is why, if you look at in the US, for example, drugs like hydrochloroquine that they were proposing is using for treating malaria. Malaria is not a virus, so you can't use things which are not meant. This is science. So let's understand the science of it. And I would like all of you to just follow. You don't have to be a medic, but you can follow and understand the disease, which then brings in, which is dealing with the disease. Why it's important to understand dealing with the disease is because the science of managing it is still too far. A vaccine, for example, is 1 to 2 years away. So we have to live in this situation until a vaccine emerges. So we have just to say, part of reopening your business and thriving is to say, what are the protocols of living with the disease? So don't see that we have a post-COVID, just look at it as we have living with COVID as a challenge. And so there have been so many protocols. I think Martha talked about them through KEPSA. The government is also introducing protocols, and I'm sure even your own company has developed protocols on how to live. So a vaccine is 1 to 2 years away. By the time even it arrives in our part of the world, it could even be 3 years. A cure, I don't want to speculate, but curing a virus is almost impossible. So we are unlikely to get a cure for this disease. So forget it. Look at HIV, for example. It has been with us for 40 years. We have not found a cure yet. All we just have are drugs for managing the disease. So I would like you to implement these protocols as quickly as possible, adjust the company in a very, very short time. My colleague before talked about bringing 2025 in a matter of weeks. If your company has not adjusted to living with COVID, please adjust it quickly, because there is no other way. The tourism industry is grappling with adjusting to COVID quickly, and they just have no choice. Then the other thing which then we must roll out is adjusting mindsets. Now, a mindset is an attitude. It's a product of an attitude and habits and what we then call organizational culture. I think COVID has brought a cultural revolution in a matter of weeks. The only challenge we have with that, Terian, is that culture is not something the human mind is not a switch. The way God made us is we are like a large ship that has to turn around over a long distance. Actually, I mean, psychologists say for you to make a human being unlearn the past, it takes 5 to 7 years. We don't have that luxury of 5 to 7 years. So we need a cultural revolution rather than an evolution. So some revolution has to happen. So what we need in organizations now are rapid change management programs in trying to adjust the employees. What are we adjusting basically? We are adjusting our processes. That is why that distinction of digitization and digitalization has to come quickly. What are you exactly doing in the organization? Movement to technology platforms has to be very, very rapid. Okay, move a lot of your processes to technology platforms. And then also allowing employees to then work from home as it's also part of that. So it can create challenges. For example, where I work in Jubilee, one of the first problems that emerged within 2 months was employees are complaining about back problems. The reason? The chairs they're using at home were never meant for office work. So you sit for a long period on a dining hall chair. The dining hall chair, when it was designed, was never meant for 8 hours of sitting. So small things like those need to be tweaked quickly. So what we have done now is we do employee survey every month just to understand their feedback and how they have adjusted. Many of them, their homes were never meant for offices. I know the elite here probably could create a room, but there are many employees, majority of them cannot create a room where they can do office work peacefully. So we need to understand that a lot of our employees may not have the environment to work at home the way they do in the office. So we are also thinking through and getting their feedback, and we are adjusting the organization as quickly as we can for processes and platforms. The other thing we have to do on the customer front is to review products. Your products, either a good or a service, has to be relooked at on how you deliver it, distribution, and then also, if it is a service, how do you then minimize human touch? Because this disease is about human touch. So you make sure that a lot of the products, you minimize human touch. For example, in insurance, a lot of the processes in insurance are manual, files move around. And that human touch is that become an instrument of transmission. So what we are doing is how do we digitize this so that then our interaction with the customer becomes very low human touch. And that is what, so we need to tweak products as quickly as possible to make them more customer friendly, and then also to minimize transmission of the disease. So if you are still in an industry with high human touch, then you will then go through a bigger revolution in the way you interact with the customers. The other thing also is, as you then make this adjustment, what is the best medicine for it? Because you are giving the organization a huge shock overnight. The best medicine for this is communication. Communication, communication, communication. When this crisis happened, us in Jubilee, we were meeting every day from 7:30, just to, all the leaders met every morning just to say, where are we, what are the problems, and we resolve problems. After 2 months, we adjusted and we now meet twice a week. So internally, we communicate a lot to our staff. There is a memo, not quite a memo, pictures, there are many pictures. Communication to staff. Initially, it was 4 per day. Now we have reduced it to 2. So every day we communicate to our staff what is new, what they need to do. And then the other stakeholder we never forgot was the board, because you still remember, boards typically meet every quarter, but now this was a crisis of global proportions. So what do? We now communicate to the board once a week. What is just the status of the business? And then what we also did was then we discarded our budgets for the year, because the budgets were based on assumptions which no longer hold. And we are now operating on a 3-month forecast. So all our KPIs and balance scorecards change completely. And we now focus on how far can you predict in the future, and we can hazard a guess every 3 months. So we have adjusted the scorecards to just be looking at what happens every 3 months. And we now review twice a week on how far we are going. And I can assure you that the adjustment has been quick, rapid, and communication has been our medicine, as it were. And so we are now looking in the future with tweaked products. Like this morning, we were meeting one of our intermediaries. And in that meeting, we were saying, how do we tweak the products given that the circumstances have changed dramatically? And so therefore, we are re-energizing the company into new platforms, enhanced products. We even thought of new products, which we had not thought of before, or we had thought about, but we thought it was 3 to 5 years away. Now that has come to the front, and we are now looking at those new products, and then new culture for the employees. What's a culture? A culture is a product of 3 things: values, behaviors, and habits. So we are changing all those 3 very rapidly through the communication process. And I can tell you that when psychologists talk about 5 to 7 years, we are now talking about, we are probably now talking about having some of those things happen in a matter of weeks, which would have taken 5 to 7 years. So therefore, what are we seeing? As we go forward, a reformed company completely, and generally a new society with new values, new behaviors, and new habits. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julius, for just taking us through, some of the strategies and the thinking around, how to cope and how to create a new culture around the business in as far as the pandemic is concerned. I'd like to welcome Jeff Odundo. Jeff is the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Jeff, over to you now to give us some of your thoughts, as well as a look at how companies are responding, especially, we've seen how the markets are across the world and not just in Kenya. How is it? Just give us a brief, and then we will get into a chat with Jose Akili, and then we'll open it up to conversations with our audience.
Thank you, Terianne, and thank you, the audience, for turning up in large numbers for this webinar. First of all, I just appreciate what I've just heard from the previous speakers. I think Chris has captured something I've always believed in, that every crisis presents an opportunity, so we should never let a good crisis go to waste. I appreciate it's very rare to meet a contrarian like Chris, and he was able to give us very good insights on some of the ways that and opportunities that present themselves. And I think Kip has captured very well a lot of what companies are doing. As one of our largest listed companies, he's spoken about how they've transformed and the digitization plans have taken into place and what that is doing towards changing the way things are done. And I think that's really what is cutting across many companies. I probably want to start with a statement I just saw today from Jack Ma, where he says that for people in business, 2020 is really just a year for staying alive. Don't even talk about your dreams or plans. Just make sure you stay alive. And if you stay alive, then you would have made a profit. I think that is really, really the what's pretending for how we're going to be able to cope during this particular COVID period. Now, as I go through my discussion, I'd just like to maybe lay a perspective of how has COVID impacted on the capital markets and really just generally in the economies. I think we have seen a general decline of projected growth, both globally, regionally, and in Kenya. I think globally, the projections are that we're going to be seeing a deceleration of growth of about 3%. In Kenya, we have actually projected that now growth for 2020 is going to be around 2.1%. And all this is because of the impact COVID has presented to all the key growth sectors. Primarily, our service sector is largely impacted on, and that has really affected the growth projections there. We've seen a lot of impact on government borrowing plans. There's a heavy domestic borrowing plan at the moment. We're seeing shilling weakening. The index exchange has actually decelerated over 20%, and that's cut across various markets. A rise in unemployment. I think we've seen quite a number of institutions suspending or even declining, freezing salaries and or maybe doing pay cuts. So there's generally a major economic impact that we'll have to live with for a while. And it's really how do we reposition ourselves to counter this. On the capital markets front, we've seen a lot of global volatility. Markets in the first quarter of this year experienced about 20% dips across the globe. The volatility is still going on, despite some economics showing some levels of recovery. I talked about capital flows. Capital flows, especially to emerging markets, have declined, but we've seen local investors playing a bigger role this particular half of the year. With reduced liquidity, we're also seeing reduced foreign sovereign activity. So generally, I think the COVID crisis has presented an unprecedented risk to the global financial markets, and that's what we forecast is going to be going on for a while. Now, given what has presented itself, and I like what was captured earlier by the respective speakers, what COVID has done, it has actually put our BCP plans to work. I think a lot of organizations have been having business continuity plans and risk management programs, but these have all been all documents in our shelves. But we were slowly drifted, or rapidly drifted rather, into a whole BCP arrangement where we had to look for how do we ensure that our businesses continue despite the challenges we face. Now, let me just give a perspective of the capital markets and the stock market in Kenya. So for a long time, we've been having, of course, we have evolved from a manual market to a fully automated market. But we never imagined that we would have a fully remote trading environment. I think we had put all these things in plan, and unfortunately last year we upgraded our systems. But having a full remote environment where you don't have people in the office, you don't have people in our trading community in their offices, and everybody trading from home and accessing all channels to trade was something we didn't imagine. Today, all our trading members, our brokers, our investment banks, are all trading from home. They're accessing the market, they're able to access Bloomberg and Reuters and all the other information channels. And we've seen good trading happening. In fact, Ariane, in the last 6 months, we are seeing better turnover than we saw last year. To date, we've done about 99 billion in terms of equity volume and almost 370 billion in bond turnover. And that just shows that the transformation or what challenges sometimes can present and enable you just change the way you do your things. So that has been one key aspect of what we've seen happening here. The other transformation that we've seen, we've had to totally, our issuers have had to change the way they do their businesses. So some of the companies that we have are now engaging themselves in supporting healthcare provision. So previously, probably you are in manufacturing chemicals and industrial chemicals, for instance. You're now compelled, or you're changing your business lines to provide products to support healthcare. And so there's a reconfiguration of industries towards supporting this particular important cause. And that's a new norm that we see presenting itself. The other thing that we've seen is that for a long time, organizations have been profit-centric. So your aspirations, your business, your objectives are all centered towards profit and providing shareholder value. But we've now seen a redirection towards supporting the community, supporting social income support, and really prepositioning your businesses to support the customers and consumers yourself. Good examples, some of our members in the exchange are engaged in providing personal protective equipment. We've seen joint support towards financing programs, helping the government to meet the healthcare support that they need. And so it's been a total change where now sustainability of businesses and sustainable and ensuring that your businesses remain impactful is becoming more prominent than the objective to make money. Because the realization here is, if you do not have those consumers, then what profit would you make? So it's really around addressing that. And that's been a very positive rethink that we've seen. I think one of the most important things we've seen with COVID is about people, especially your staff. For a long time, we've looked at the people aspect of business as just one resource or a component resource in an organization. But COVID has made us realize that this is a very, very important resource, and health and safety of staff members is very important. I'll give you an example. At the NSC, for a long time, my HR team kept telling me we need to introduce flexi hours and remote working and everything. And I struggled. I mean, I've got a very high number of millennials in this organization, and I really struggled. I said, there's nothing in our HR manual that speaks to this, and I don't know how to monitor and track stuff. I can tell you today, I think we're only 3 of us in the office today. Everybody's working from home. I'm seeing more productivity, better tracking, and that kind of thing. So this response has been necessitated by this challenge that has presented itself. And so that's another key aspect of what we continue to see. How our businesses relate to their stakeholders has changed. For a long time, we were struggling with the idea of doing electronic AGMs. But given the new health protocols presented, innovations have come. And today, electronic AGMs are being held. We've all gone through this, and it's been very, very successful. And so this has now become a new way and a new thinking around how we'll be able to engage with other stakeholders. And so all these aspects are continue to present themselves, and we see, I believe, as Chris said, digitalization will be how companies respond in these new times. The reality is, I think we need to, I tend to agree with Kipngetich. There is no silver bullet that will cure this situation in the short term. I think probably a vaccine will come, and that will be more preventive than curative. And so we have to learn to adapt to these new norm and our new. And so, what are the opportunities we see now for businesses as we move forward? So one, we see new opportunities. We see emergence of new industries. I think businesses must now really look at their plans afresh. It's not the time to stick to your 5-year strategy. I think we now need scenario planning strategies, short-term, realistic, and achievable. If there's a line of business that I never wanted to explore, I think we need to explore. Look at your whole sphere of how you operate and see what businesses you can adapt. As I said earlier, people who were previously manufacturing, say, alcohol are now doing sanitizer goods and stuff like that. And so there's going to be a change of that. And I believe that great opportunity is presenting itself. I think the whole contactless lifestyle is going to be the new norm in a long time. And so what opportunities again present themselves here? For a long time, Kenyans didn't believe in remote shopping and home deliveries. And so industries like those are emerging. And even those who are already in that business are experiencing good performances. So contactless opportunities are areas which we can explore. Technology adoption. I think this is now the new norm. We have to appreciate technology. And for those who struggle, and it's time now that we must just appreciate this is a new life. I, for one, have never been in those social sites. I now believe I have to be there. That's where a lot of the communication is going to happen. And so that's another area and a change that I see happening. I think COVID is going to make us focus on what's important. We're going to have to really reprioritize our plans. If a plan or if an objective is also making substantial contribution to your organization, I think you need to sort of let that go and focus on what's important and really reprioritize how you want to achieve that. Appreciation of risk. For a long time, the risk aspect of any business has been taken as sort of a very not top of mind thinking. What COVID has taught us is that risk is really top of mind. And the organizations that are surviving today are those who put risk programs at a very, very advanced level. And this cuts across. I mean, enterprise-wide risk is now going to be something that organizations will have to adopt to. Really looking at all aspects of your business, be it in your operations, be it in your people agenda, be it in your strategic plans. How do you map the risk? How do you mitigate it? How do you measure it? And how do you even automate it? So that you're able to ensure that your organization remains well insulated and be able to continue operational. And that should be monitored at a very, very high level. And so I think that's going to be a reality. I think we need to really be aware that anything can happen. COVID was unprecedented. And so people did not anticipate that. So we need to have a very proactive thinking strategy about any eventuality. How will this business remain alive in the event of any eventuality? Because it'll be COVID today, tomorrow it'll be something else. Yes. And that calls for a lot of thinking around it. Yeah. And so I think going forward and looking into the future, my crystal ball view is that we will get through this. It's a stormy path at the moment. There are opportunities that we need to look at. In the capital markets, I think if there's no better time to invest in stocks like now, this is the time. We're seeing low valuations like never seen before. All our companies, I believe, have put in plans and we've engaged all of them. We have received COVID responses from all of them. And I can assure you, all the companies of the exchange are pretty resilient and have put in place plans to ensure that they go through this very well. So I have a very positive crystal ball view about how the markets are going to pretend. And just look at the current volumes we're experiencing, it tells you a lot. Internationals are still very, very active in our market. And so I do take a view that we have better days ahead, but we must really change how we're going to run our businesses. So I'll probably just want to pause there and engage more in the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff, for your thoughts. And of course, I can see we've got a number of questions that are addressed to you. So we'll try and make sure that we address those when we come back for the Q&A. But it's glad to see that, you are just as positive and, just coming off the heels of some of the other panelists saying this is a time to survive. Just make sure your business does not die and you'll still make a profit. I'd like to let us all know that we are running a poll and you will see it on your screens. And the question, the poll is on whether you think your business and company will survive the COVID-19 pandemic. So you'll see a screen pop up on your screen. Please take part in that poll so that we're able to also just see at the end of the day where are we at. And I can see we have 249 participants who are with us. I'd like to encourage us all to engage on that particular poll. I'd like to now welcome Mr. Jose Akili, to give us his thoughts. And I'd like to request the panelists as well as the attendees just to give us about 10, 12 minutes. That's after 11:30, which is when we were supposed to end. But you'll agree with me, the presentations have been very engaging, have had great and deep insights for all of us to engage in. So for now, I'd like to ask us that just to let us stay aware that I'd like to push it to wind up at around 11:40 as opposed to 11:30, which is when we're supposed to end, just so that we can have some engagement and the Q&A as well. Mr. Jose Akili, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Terihan. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Good morning, I think all the panelists and the participants to this forum, which has been arranged by our consulting arm of CPF group. I really want to say I'm very particularly impressed by the turnout of the participants, and indeed the worthy presentations by my predecessor panelists. I would like to say that a little bit about CPF group. It's an institution which has been established under the county government pensions sector and has grown to be a business entity which comprises 4 companies and also 3 pension schemes, which are catering for officers and employees of county governments. In addition, we have our product M-Pension, which is delivered to every Kenyan through digital platforms, particularly. And we are able, therefore, to enlist members and recruit and even get payments through that channel from every contributor and even pay them their benefits at the end of the day. So what have we done at CPF Group to really adjust and, in fact, thrive at this time of COVID-19? One of the things we did before, a number of years back, 10 years back, was to be a unique public sector institution. First, we chose to diversify from just a pure product of pension, and we went into pension administration through our CPF Financial Services, which I'm the group CEO, and we established a robust financial institution to manage pensions for not only our captive clients in the county governments, but also far afield to any other employer wants to have a well-managed system. And we developed a very robust Microsoft-based Navision ERP system to manage all these diverse products. We also decided to convert our previous IT department into a whole fully-fledged company, which we call Lights. And we also converted our risk management institution to become a new company. I mean, the department to become a company called LIB, which is a participant in an intermediary for insurance services and risk management. We then further converted our internal property management department into a company called Laser Properties. Now, one of the things then we adopted was to manage all diverse business entities we are setting up. We decided to adopt technology very far, because we found that we're dealing with thousands and thousands of members. We cannot do it manually with a small staff. And therefore, we relied more on having virtual offices in all our county governments to be able to deal with our members right where they are. And that's why we adopted technology from that time. We actually were able to even attract the attention of the previous Ministry of Immigration and Citizens Affairs, who actually gave us a job to digitize 100 million records of Kenyan identification cards for all the Kenyans. And we did it successfully. And as a result, Kenyans now are able to, their records are actually digitized and is available for anybody to benefit from. If you want to confirm who is a Kenyan or who is an alien and who is not who is a real, authentic person. So all that service we were able to help, and as a result of that, we have been a leading provider of electronic document and management services across the public sector as well as in the private sector. Our customers actually go far beyond the boundaries of Kenya to Uganda and so forth. Now, coming to how we have been able to adjust to COVID, we actually have embraced one very important philosophy for our institution. We adopted the philosophy that our staff are the best, the most important resource, and therefore their welfare was far important than anything else. So we were able to, because we had already digitalized our services, we were able to work remotely immediately. COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic in Kenya. And right now, we are working just like the NSC, where I'm a director, from home with a few members of staff only in the office to do a few things just to engage the customers who come to the front office. Basically, we have had a seamless working environment, no difficulty at all. We have been able to perform even better. We have not downsized our staff. They are more productive where they are. We take care of them. We actually provide them transport if they have to come to the office, dedicated transport, so that they do not have to commingle with people whom they do not know whether they have already been infected. We are also able to provide all of them with the PPEs so that they are able to protect themselves against the risk. And we emphasize this fact very much. We offer them psycho-counseling services where they are occasionally, and they have them the services on a telephone call away or a Zoom call away. Now, one of the things we have seen then as an opportunity is to assist other organizations to actually enhance their own digitization environment or digitalization environment. And this we have been offering to many levels in government. We have actually previously been approached by the Ministry of Lands to assist them in digitizing their property lands records. And indeed, we are hoping that these crisis will actually accelerate the adoption of this technology by Kenyans. We actually, in CPF Group, we believe that although this crisis is a pandemic, it's actually godsend for converting our normally lethargic bureaucracy in government to go fully to digital technology across all the spheres. And I think Kenyans will be beneficiaries in the long run when the entire government is digital. We appreciate the judiciary for having immediately converted. Even my colleague lawyers who are very, very reluctant to join the technology march have actually done so. And that is something very appreciable. So now we are seeing judiciary operating in Kenya from locations which hitherto were not actually possible. A lot of trappings of ceremony and customs have been discarded for the purpose of justice. And justice is actually being delivered faster than before. I think Kenyans can only embrace, if this pandemic is causing all this, we can only say thank you. Now, what I can see as opportunities for the future for our country, and this one to all our listening participants, is that I see opportunities rather than the challenges presenting itself. For example, currently, because of this pandemic, people are walking away from their offices and offices are empty. Now, it is important that for those real estate investors, they immediately begin to have a total overhaul of their mindsets and begin to offer short-term licenses to entrepreneurial young people to use these offices, at least for some time, without asking them to sign long-term lease agreements. They just have a pay-as-you-go use. And the young people will be able to come and work from these beautiful offices and be able to achieve their dreams of being entrepreneurs. The other one, if, for example, we have all the huge warehouses which have been empty, this is the right time now to actually convert them temporarily to be medical stores and possibly even provide temporary isolation centers for the many patients who might be requiring these services. I would like that this is done by the government rather than using schools as isolation centers, because we want our children to have their schools back in January. So what could be a long-term arrangement is to have the warehouses converted into isolation centers across the country. And this will revive the business for the private sector. And I think KEPSA should take up this particular call on our behalf to the government. The second one is the hotel industry. I see two opportunities for the hotel industry. I see the opportunity of converting our luxurious hotel accommodation to be leased to the private sector hospitals and even public sector hospitals, and the staff who are currently being retrenched, like for example, I saw the Continental Nairobi is closing shop. That's an opportunity I believe KEPSA should seize and ask maybe Nairobi Hospital to negotiate and train to a crash program for training the hospitality staff in those hospitals, in these hotels, to be able to work as caregivers to the people who are going to be isolated. I believe they can be given a crash course, 3 weeks or a month or 2, and they'll be able to be easily convertible into caregivers, if not almost able to take up the role of nurse aides. We don't want to let our people become jobless. We must give them a new lease of life, and the businesses which own these hotels must be given an opportunity to provide alternative services. When I look back at the Second World War, I saw pictures of how people converted, housewives became nurses, how normal ordinary farmers became manufacturers of arms and producers of food to feed the military. Why can't we do the same? This is a similar crisis we are facing here in Kenya and in the whole world. I see opportunity, for example, now that people are staying at home and children are living at home and they would like to go outside, at least we could take advantage. The opportunity for our national parks to convert and create digital tourism is possible, according to me. I would be happy to visit the entire migration which is happening now at the park in Masai Mara, using a camera which is remotely organized by the tour companies, with maybe 1 or 2 cameramen, taking us around to visit and see live some of these things from the comfort of our homes or in our offices. I see these opportunities emerging, and all of us will be picking the business and letting it continue. I see food production, how much we can produce better. Digital technology to be able to help us to actually be more productive. Most of us have been telephone farmers. This is a time to actually become maybe digital farmers, so that we are able to have CCTV cameras on our horticultural farms, so that we are able to watch as things happen and make sure that we are not cheated by the people we lived in charge of our little farms back in the countryside, and also within nearby areas in Nairobi. I see these opportunities emerging, Terian, and I think what we need to do is KEPSA should assist all of us to thrive the agenda of alternative business models. And we at CPF Group are already thinking like that. And that's the reason why we are now actually using some of the opportunities which the market presents, particularly in partnership with Safaricom, to allow Kenyans to join our M-Pension, the digital pension product, using their phone, at the same time being able to convert Bonga points into pension savings. We will be unveiling some of these innovative products in due course. Thank you very much, Terian, for this opportunity. And thank you everybody for coming and participating in our CPF Consulting webinar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kili, for your thoughts. And I can see that we have just a few minutes to wind up. We have a number of questions, so I'd like to ask all our panelists to be on standby, just so that I can pose some questions to you. On the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of the page, I see that some questions have already been answered. For our panelists, if you're able to answer directly on that tab as well, we will appreciate. But meanwhile, I will just start to ask a number of questions. We've got a question for Mr. Chris Hafner. How can upcoming entrepreneurs best leverage the COVID-19 crisis to enable, to establish their business, to establish their businesses with little human and financial capital? That's from Leila Kange. Mr. Hafner?
So I have a saying that I use, which is, think big, start smart, scale fast. So I would put the financial and human capital aspects off to the side, right? Don't constrain yourself in the ideation phase. What you want to do is go ahead and let yourself think big. And from there, you can then start to narrow down into what are the small incremental bits of value you may be able to deliver. So that's the think big, start smart. So pick something very small that you can start with, and then scale fast and clearly have a plan for how do you expand from there and grow. And I think it's a tremendous time when we talk about geography being everything and geography being nothing, for an individual with nothing more than maybe a computer and a smartphone and access to YouTube. Like it or not, I would bet everyone's children learn more from YouTube, learn more skills from YouTube than they do anywhere else. So you can learn all the skills you need to learn. You can leverage technology very easily with a variety of free and open source code and technologies, and get things to market, test them, be prepared to fail, learn from it, and move on.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. We've got a question for Mr. Kipngetich. Assuming that most companies are experiencing higher productivity working from home, do you think that is worth re-evaluating maternity and paternity leaves in terms of duration post-COVID? Dr. Kipngetich?
That's an interesting question, Terian. What I can say is overall, everything will change. If you are imagining that we are going back to the world pre-COVID, the answer is no. A lot of the things we practiced, a lot of our habits pre-COVID are going to change fundamentally. They may not change all at once. Remember what Chris was saying, think big, start small, scale fast. A lot of things will be starting small, but what we are seeing is a reordering of the planet, a reordering of society as a result of COVID. And we are going into a world which is low touch. So that is why digitization is very important. We are going into a world of very low touch in all aspects, even in sectors like education, like tourism, which are high touch, will eventually transition into low touch economies. Even when we solve COVID eventually, which probably 5-10 years, low touch will become our new habits. So therefore, when we now talk about paternity leave and things like those, you are imagining a pre-COVID world of working from 8 to 5 and also having the normal calendar. The calendar of work has changed fundamentally. If you ask your employees, and I told you, we do a survey of our employees every month, they are the ones who manage their time. There's no more 8 to 5. They wake up at 3 o'clock, and if they have an assignment to do, they do it at 3 o'clock at their own free time. Because remember, they are not coming to the office. So they have become their own managers. There are some who are, I interviewed some informally and saying, I have been able to take another job. They are saying, remember, I will deliver the Jubilee job. I have taken up another job. One is teaching online. Another one is teaching students in science. Another one is teaching music. So people have taken their own other jobs and without compromising their own productivity for Jubilee assignments. And they are the ones who then order their time. So what I see coming up, Terian, where we are going to is piece rates. We are no longer going to be paying salaries. We will pay you a job we value, we agree, and we say, for this assignment, you have taken 3 hours, I pay you so much, thank you. And we have a standing arrangement. And for every activity that you do, we then value that job. That is the new future, guys. So issues of then paternity, not paternity, that will now be your own free time. So you will see now Parliament evolving, let's hope ours evolves. So evolving quickly to then create new legislation. But remember, all society's activities cannot be legislated. Some of these things will just be things you do as a person, rearrange your time, manage your time, and you're good to go. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kipngetich. I'll take a very quick question to Jeff, and then we'll finish up with Mr. Kili. Jeff, a final question to you. I see a question about whether the NSC is riding on the relief funds, and which is why it hasn't suffered as much. That's a question from a lady who's on the panel. And we've got a question as well on diaspora and what they should look for on the NSC. And perhaps you can wrap up with how do we encourage more local investors to play a huge role in this regard?
Okay, thank you, Terian. Most certainly, I can attest and say that the investors we see at the NSC are our existing investors. There's no relief money that has found its way through the market. And I believe it's all going to the right cause. So what you're seeing is a large proportion of our investors who are trading now are the retail and the local fund managers, which is a good sign. Our intention is always to have a 50-50 foreign local investor participation. And so I'm happy to note that our local investors are seeing value in the market. And so that's really the opportunities that are presenting themselves. For our diaspora and our retail clients, we recently relaunched our NSC app, which has a gateway to the brokers. So if you go into our app, the NSC app, you'll be able to see the list of all the brokers, and you'll be able to directly go to their mobile and online trading platforms. Besides that, the app has got a lot of information about markets, all the announcements, the history of companies. So you'll be able to also track the performance of the market. So the NSC app is now sort of our platform for the retail and the diaspora to be able to have full visibility of the market and also be able to trade. So my parting shot to our retail investors is this is a great opportunity. We have seen this kind of cycles before. The markets are now trading at very low valuations. And so anybody coming in now, potentially when we see some level of recovery, stands to make some gains. So it's a buy time, and I just want to encourage them to participate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. I'll go to Mr. Kili now. I see there's a number of questions to you as well. One on the opportunities within the tourism and hotel space. I can see somebody here saying, Mr. Kili, I hope the president has your ear. He needs to hear some of these things you are talking about. And perhaps with that, you can just give us a wrap, some of your closing thoughts, so I can hand over to Rosemary to wrap the session this morning.
Yes, I think the opportunities are immense across all sectors, I can tell you. I think the problem is only our ability to think outside the box. I'm ready and I'm available if the president can be available for me to express my innovations, ideas which can then be used to assist this country. I'm able to do that through KEPSA, of course. KEPSA is we are members of KEPSA CPF group, and we will be able to share some of this information. But the hope is that this is a time when we call upon the captains of industry to think outside the box, to see opportunities to make Kenya be the provider of solutions at this particular time to the rest of the African continent. We have the capacity, we have the skill sets. So when I go back to the tourism industry, they don't need to die. They don't need to suffer. We can adopt all the wild animals as Kenyans and possibly an account can be opened for us to support the rangers. We can put money there. You can put the wonderful cameramen, the ones who have been maybe the journalists who are looking for business. They should go out to the parks and provide us live coverage, which Kenyans can watch on YouTube and all kinds of things. And we can pay for them also, pay by view, maybe, and so forth. So when you look at the hotel industry, I don't believe they should just collapse. This is an opportunity whereby at the moment I'm looking at the United Nations, UNEP has actually offered to build a new isolation center or center at the Nairobi Hospital at a cost of $1 billion for their staff. I don't see why they have to wait for that to be ready. They can immediately take up Nairobi Intercontinental Hotel and Hilton Hotel, which are currently empty. Those staff can be retrained and they can take care of this. These are luxury facilities which can easily be used for our high level of members of society who have money to pay for this. And I would like to appeal to my co-panelist, Mr. Kingetich, who is also our chairman, that please be here for your customers. These insurance companies made profits many years ago when we didn't have pandemics. Why can't you come up with a product for your customers which can then take care of them when they are in these particular isolation centers? This is something which Kenyans will remember you for a long time. Let us not abandon our people when COVID comes in. Let us treat it as a normal illnesses and so forth, and then we can insure them. I think the opportunity, when I saw NHIF pulling out the black from insuring people for COVID-19 admissions, I actually felt very sad, and I said, this is the worst time. It's not the right thing to do at all. If I was in charge of these institutions, I would definitely not be going that route. We must be here for Kenyans. We must use the savings we have made in the past to actually deliver for our people. Thank you very much, Terian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kili, for winding us up on such a positive note, and of course, posing a great challenge to us and to your fellow panelists as well. We are ready to wrap now. Just to quickly share the results of the poll that we put out earlier. What is the most critical survival ingredient for your company or business? It was a multiple choice question. Processes got 13%. Leadership, the results for that is 17%, and both 73%. So most of you believe that both leadership and processes are the most critical survival ingredient for your company or business. We did one other panel question as well. I hope that will be put up just now. And if it isn't, all right, it looks like it isn't being put up. However, I have the results with me, which had been done earlier. Do you think your company, business or company will survive COVID-19? Yes. 88%, that's incredibly great news to see. At least we are all still positive, no matter how difficult the situation seems to look. Not sure, 12%. We hope after this conversation, or being part of this conversation, has changed that and has hopefully steered you towards the right direction in terms of how you're coping, how will you stay alive, and perhaps in the near future, you can then begin to re-strategize. I'd like to thank you all for being part of the conversation. My name is Terian Chebet, and I'd like to hand us over to our host, Rosemary, who will then wrap the session for us. Rosemary?
Thank you very much, Terian Chebet, and thank you so very, very much, our participants. Thank you, our panelists and our contributors, for your nuggets of wisdom. Thank you very, very much, our technical team. What has emerged from this conversation is that we will surely emerge and evolve. And I like what I am seeing from the polls, that 88% are very, very optimistic that we will surely emerge and evolve. It has also come out very clearly that leadership and processes will be the ingredients or the vehicles that will take us to our new world as we navigate these waters. Good people, we have also learned from our panelists and contributors that besides emerging and evolving, we need to create new behaviors and new habits. We will need to create alternative business models, and we will need to create an enabling business environment. That's where KEPSA comes in. And I am very excited to note that at CPF Consulting, we have a training on the 27th of this month where we will be discussing entrepreneurship and how do we create these new business models. I am excited to see from Jeff Odundo that most critical for us is to remain alive. And for us to remain alive, leaders must ensure the health of their employees. If you're going to ensure the health of our employees in order to survive, then ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to announce that on the 13th of this month, we will be hosting a training on psychological wellness. Because really, if you're going to emerge and if you're going to evolve, then we will need to remain alive. We have also seen from our discussions that it is critical that we continue communicating. Change management must be the way we do our things. We are very happy that Chris Hafner brought out the matters to do with digitalization and digitization. Are they one and the same thing? We have just learned that they are not one and the same thing, but they're both critical to business. So for us to emerge and evolve, it is so apt that we were discussing this today because, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to join us on the 19th of August, yet another Wednesday, as we discuss this technology issue, digitalization and digitization as the key driver for business recovery and growth. I wish to thank you most sincerely for being with us the entire morning. We are sure that in the next 2 weeks, we'll be with you again. We have been your hosts, CPF Consulting, trainers and consultants in management, in leadership, in entrepreneurship, pre-retirement, and a host of other training areas. Thank you very much. My name is Rosemary Maina. Thank you so very, very much for joining us today. Asanteni.